Hello and welcome to the latest Chalkbeat Ideas event. Has the Trump administration returned education to the states? I'm Matt Barnum, and I'm the editor of Chalkbeat Ideas, where we examine the big questions, big debates, and big ideas shaping American education. I first want to thank our sponsor, the Indiana State Teachers Association. Sponsors like ISTA help make our events possible. Our events are editorially independent of our sponsors. I also want to thank you all for being here. You can't see each other, but please know there are hundreds of you in this Zoom right now and counting. Educators, policy wonks, journalists, parents, and others who care about schools. I'm really glad to be here with you for this important conversation, and I appreciate you all making time out of your day. We'll have time for questions at the end. You can feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box at any point, though, and then look at the questions that have been submitted by others and upvote the ones you want me to ask the panelist. So let's get into it. If there is one big idea the Trump administration has advanced in education, it's a promise to return it to the states. So I wanted to figure out what that has meant and how it's played out in states and schools. To speak to this, we have two state leaders with us today. Dr. Katie Jenner is Indiana's Secretary of Education, overseeing 8 state agencies and boards, including leading Indiana's Department of Education. Dr. Jenner previously served as a high school teacher, preschool through 12 district leader, and a vice president of the statewide higher education institution. Dr. Jenner, thanks for joining us. Is there a typo in your bio? Do you really lead 8 state agencies and boards? That's quite a lot.
Yeah, that is true. I had the opportunity to begin serving under Governor Eric Holcomb about 6 years ago or so, and it was Department of Education and State Board of Education. And then when Governor Mike Braun came in, he expanded the portfolio to really look at the whole education vertical, and it's actually proven very, very helpful because K-12 and higher education and workforce, we all should be working hand in hand for the students of Indiana. So it's a lot, but it's a good a lot. And we have an army of people in Indiana who are working to make that happen.
Great. Well, thanks for fitting me in into what must be a busy schedule. We also have Angélica Infante-Green, who has served as Rhode Island's Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education since April 2019. Commissioner Infante-Green began her career as a bilingual classroom teacher in the South Bronx. Since leaving the classroom, the commissioner has served in a variety of roles focused on improving instruction for all students, in particular students learning English. Commissioner, thanks for joining us. How many boards and agencies do you lead? 8, 7? One?
I have about a 6, 7, not as big as hers, I'll tell you that.
So let's dive in with what seems like a simple question. Has education, in fact, been returned to your state? Has it been returned to Indiana, Dr. Jenner?
So it's interesting. I was just at a speaking event right before this to Hoosiers, and that's a common question that many of the state chiefs across the country get. A lot of people don't know that our states have always had control of the standards, the curriculum, the assessment, and every state looks a little bit different in how they leverage that control and whether locals have that control. But in terms of the federal government, really it's the money. So Indiana gets about $1 billion in federal funding that is formulaic. And then, of course, probably like Angélica, we also do our best to apply for some of the competitive grants too. So when it comes to the federal funding that is formulaic, we have the opportunity right now to apply for a federal waiver. Folks on the call should know Angélica and I know each other very, very well, and have had many of these conversations for months now. And in Indiana, it really made sense for us to opt in and seek a waiver, specifically a block grant for our federal dollars at the state level, which of course Iowa and Louisiana have now received. And then we also applied for a block grant for our locals. And glad to talk more about that, Matt, but we are within days of you hearing something. I do not have permission to say when yet, but very soon.
Okay, maybe I can wheedle you into making some news, but let's turn it over to Commissioner Infante-Green. Has education been returned to Rhode Island?
It's always been here, right? I think it's a convenient talking point to really dismantle the Department of Education because it's always been here. I mean, and Katie just said that we have always been in charge of and leading the education systems in our state. That has not changed. What we have experienced is a little bit of uncertainty with funding because we do rely on federal funding. I think that it's really important for the work that we do, particularly for the variety of students that we all have in our states. But nothing has changed in terms of my responsibility. I will say I'm involved in a lot more lawsuits than I have been ever in my career because, funding is important to us, especially to a state like mine. There was a time not too long ago that our funding, we didn't know whether we were going to get funding. It was taken off the table. And I think that is a big role that the federal government plays for all of us. And we're creatures of habit. We plan ahead. So when you find out that you're not going to receive certain dollars, I think that that's very challenging for us. So returning it to the states, it's always been here. I will say that. I have said that publicly. I do think that what has changed, which is a little concerning to me, is the oversight, right? And OCR and the kind of work that we depend on that sometimes is not in the role of the state all the time. So there's much to talk about this as we unpack it. And I see things a little differently than Katie. These dollars are there for a reason, and they were appropriated for particular populations. And I think that it is, we have to be very careful with that. And I think that we have a different approach. We're looking at other opportunities for waivers that aren't just around the dollars, but really focusing in on areas that we feel our student populations can benefit from.
Yeah, and Matt,
So,
if I can
sure.
add on to that a little bit. And by the way, this is how we'll roll like the whole time. I mean, we
I
talk a
love it.
lot, but just real quick to give folks on the call, some may know. So again, about $1 billion comes to Indiana per year. And so what we're saying is give us the flexibility to focus on the main thing, which in Indiana, reading, increasing access to STEM, making sure our high schools are really building seamless pathways for kids. But I think that the key impetus to why we wanted flexibility at the local level really was hearing from our rural schools. Our rural schools may get, because in a year, people don't realize we probably get 15 federal line items. And they year over year, some last 2, some last 3. So our rural schools shared with us loud and clear, there are sometimes when they get money and it may not even be worth accepting the dollars because they'd have to hire someone that they can't pay. So again, really focusing on bringing the money together when possible, when appropriate, to serve our students in those key areas that I just mentioned. So just wanted to add that perspective.
I want to get into the details of waivers in a second, but I want to at least do 10 to 15 minutes before we fully wonk out into the weeds of waivers. And just ask a very basic question. There have been a lot of people on this Zoom have probably seen all these headlines about the federal policy changes, executive order to get rid of the education department, moving part of it to labor, proposing funding cuts, restricting DEIs. What, if anything, has trickled down into real classrooms of the federal stuff has trickled down into real classrooms in your state? Have real classrooms been affected by any of this stuff? Let's start with Rhode Island, Commissioner.
Yeah, I mean, it depends which policy, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples. We try to shield the districts from a lot of this. That is, I see that as our role at Department of Education. But when we start talking about DEI, there was a lot of question about, should we be removing DEI? Should we not be talking about this? And absolutely not. If we have a problem with inclusion, that's a problem. And diversity, we really believe strongly. And what has happened is that a lot of our money has required these executive orders or these documents that they have to sign, that the districts had to sign, that they will not be doing certain things. And we have been pretty clear that we'll take the brunt of that. But that caused a lot of anxiety in our state because we have invested a lot of time. And when we talk about DEI, I don't know how the federal government is defining it. I think that's part of the challenge. And I'll give you an example. We had a grant that was for our differently abled students on reading. And because it said that we were working with a partner that believed in equity, our money was taken away. So yeah, that was going for classroom teachers on the science of reading. That was it. That was it. So it has trickled down to the everyday in our state because those grants are important to us. And for it to be taken away because there was one word that that somebody found offensive. And I still would like a definition of what DEI, or if we're talking about we're going to feed all our kids, farm to table taken away, like those kind of things are important to us here in Rhode Island. So we see it. The bigger things, we try to shield them from it. We have taken the brunt of it when we've made lawsuits. We have signed for the districts. We have not let the districts sign so that we can have that barrier. We're trying to protect them from all the change and uncertainty. But, a lot of them had positions where they're saying, do I get rid of those positions? No, because when we're talking about equity, we're talking about reading. Who are the kids? Are differently able kids getting access to the reading materials and the training, those teachers? Are multilingual learner teachers getting the access to that kind of training? And is there the science of reading embedded with ELD? Are we doing that? It's easy to say that we're just going to do the science of reading, but there's some nuance to this. And I think that that's part of the challenge that we're facing every day. And we feel that on the ground.
Dr. Jenner, what are your thoughts on the trickle down to real classrooms?
Yeah, so at a high level, I think about, and I'm looking at our state map, 92 counties, 65,000 teachers, 1.13 million children. If I walked into 100 teachers' classrooms and said, hey, who's our U.S. Secretary of Education? Whether it's the current, whether it's the past, whether it's 10 years ago, even as a teacher myself, and I know both sides of the aisle secretaries over the past 2 decades, and by the way, appreciate their service. But teachers they're focused on kids. They're focused on the day-to-day. So sometimes the DC swirl thinks that everybody knows all the things that are going on in the swirl, and that is just not true. Again, they're focused on what gets in the way to make sure we're moving the needle for kids. The most commonly asked question that I get, or that our team gets in discussions in terms of federal law and education, beyond some of the funding that we've already talked through, is in the area of special education. I think as a shared country, we have significant work that we need to do in the space of education and special education. And so again, that's a space that we'd like to roll our sleeves up. And that's the most commonly asked question that we're getting this year, last year, the year before that, the year before that, the year before that. And by the way, we had both parties in office. So that's what I would say.
I would agree with that. I also will say, Katie, they don't know who the secretary is, but I could bet you any money they know this secretary.
They might know former Secretary Betsy DeVos as well. Actually.
Yeah, but again, I think that's a little bit sad to me, right? Because we're immediately letting politics seep into this conversation. And I think as state leaders, and Angélica, you and I have talked about this, it is our chief role to keep the main thing as much as possible. There will always, it's what our country was founded on, be a political swirl. But when it comes to education, keep the main thing. So we all know the politics are different in Rhode Island than in Indiana. But regardless, I feel deep responsibility to do everything I can to to drive what matters for kids. And we'll keep doing that.
So this may be like a short and sweet answer, but key programs have been moved from the Education Department to the Department of Labor. Has that made any difference in your state, good, bad, or indifferent?
I would say at the beginning, I think it was a little, the transition was bumpy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the department did do was that they moved the experts into those offices. So I think that that has been helpful, but you know, it had challenges, and it felt like it was done very abruptly, with very little communication. What I will say is that as we've been having conversations with the department about how to move forward, I think that there's a desire to have whatever happens moving next to be different, right? That there's a desire to not interrupt what happens at the state. So we've been having those conversations, and we have made our requests very public to the secretary and some of our respected colleagues that work there. And they have made a commitment that it will be different, that transition will be different as we move forward.
So in Indiana, a lot of the programs that were shifted are already in our Department of Workforce Development. And again, I know other states are similar, right? You have Department of Workforce Development, you have Department of Education, some have commissions for higher education, some have Department of Labor's. Like all of our states are structurally set up different. So Matt and Angélica, like to answer that question, I have an amazing team. And I have not had anyone flag, Katie, you need to make a call, which that happens from time to time. I've not had anyone say that to me. I will say that I have proactively reached out to Department of Education and Department of Labor. And they have been excellent about returning calls immediately, talking through things, all of that. So I know that was, again, a storyline. I'm highly focused on Indiana and the main thing. So trust me, if it's in our way, I'm very comfortable making calls and getting it out. But I just didn't hear that with this one.
So let's talk about your waiver requests, Secretary Jenner, briefly.
Do you have one, Angélica? Can we?
We're working on one.
Okay, good.
Okay,
good.
We can get to yours next, and we don't want to get too deep in the weeds. We want to make this friendly to folks, not get too wonky with waivers. So, Dr. Jenner, my understanding is your waiver request seeks to block grant some amount of funding to give districts more flexibility for how they're using these disparate buckets, and to allow more flexibility in the state accountability system. Is that right? And where do these waiver requests stand?
So we're within days. You will know very, very soon. On the two questions that you asked, one is get more flexibility for our local school districts to do the right thing for kids, and really hit on some reading and some of the key topics we've discussed. Absolutely. That is one of our components. That's component two. A couple of key things that we've talked to our local schools and communities. The flexibility will not be required for all schools to take and adopt. It will be an opt-in for schools, and then we will actively track that data and be very transparent with what we're learning. I think one thing, and Angélica and I talk a lot about, is the states moving the fastest are the states that are the most nimble and able to adjust. So we will be studying that data closely as we hope to have flexibility soon for some of our school corporations that are ready. The second question you asked is about accountability. I'm beyond pumped with that because we have state accountability right now. We have federal accountability. If you ask the average parent in Indiana or most educators, most just look at the state accountability or the state transparency data. Most don't know about the federal component unless it impacts, federal funding that may flow. Regardless, we have to have a coherent system where our accountability model, and again, more soon, but our elementary and middle school model did not require a waiver. We initially thought it did. Our high school model did. The high school model is set up, in Indiana, our assessment approved by the State Board of Education is the SAT. And as we're working to support our students on the best path for them, whether it is enrollment into a 4-year where the SAT might be absolutely the right, or employment or serving our country, there was a lot of discussion on is the SAT the single marker for showing a student's longitudinal success? And we believe it's a marker. But we are seeing successful students who are earning credentials of value in CTE spaces, who are doing apprenticeships and work-based learning and building these skills where they are very valuable. And so what our accountability waiver is really focused on the high school, allowing us to, our recipe for outcomes that our higher ed, our business and industry, and our military have said matter most for all kids, that will be the lead. And then our SAT will be part of it, for sure. It's important. Proficiency scores are important, but it will be part of it, not the main thing.
And we should expect news on that waiver too soon?
I feel like I've signaled this. Angélica, did I say
I guess there are two different...
No, Matt, you were well-trained in doing your job. I love how you're pushing. You will have a media advisory sometime next week. How's that?
Okay, great. I know my colleagues in Indiana will be happy to hear that.
All right.
Commissioner, did you want to share more about your waiver?
Yeah, so we're working presently on a waiver, two things. One, for our multilingual learners and using the safe harbor, we have that flexibility. So I think part of the challenge is that
Wait. Sorry. We just safe harbor. I'm not sure everyone knows what the heck that means.
So for the multilingual learners, you have the ability to actually look at the data a little differently, right? So everybody's looking at just proficiency, but also growth. And what that ESSA does for us is that, particularly for us, we were just using proficiency, and the growth we were not measuring between quartiles. And that is something that's already, it's in ESSA. And I don't think a lot of people are using it. So we have codified that in our accountability. But I think the part that is really challenging for us, we've experienced a lot of success in the last few years. We have been working on our secondary regs. We put it in place. Now, this will be our 5th year, I think, that we've had the new accountability regulations and graduation requirements, which includes CTE, which includes these high wage career opportunities. But one of the things that we're struggling with is our graduation rates are being impacted by the chilling effect of the federal role in immigration. We can't find kids. You know, and we have to find these kids to graduate with their cohort. That is a challenge right now. I'm sure that other states are experiencing the same challenge. So our waiver is looking at that a little differently. Like, what are we going to look at that's going to change that? Because we can't find a lot of these kids, and people are not being forthcoming about where they are. And the expectation is just, we just can't get there. The second one is for our non-traditional high schools. What are we looking at? How do we give more credit for credit recovery, re-engagement? So we have some schools for pregnant and parenting teens with just non-traditional, without lowering the rigor or the bar. How do we capture that? What kind of assessments, what kind of innovation can we put in place that will really capture the success of those students without lowering the bar? And I think that for us is really important, because we have not, within the parameters that already exist, been able to do that. So that's what we're going to be seeking as we move forward.
I want to do a lightning round where I ask a few questions where you're allowed one-sentence answers, because I think they warrant one-sentence answers. So let's get started with this one. Have you been paying more, less, or the same amount of attention to the federal government under this administration as compared to the last? Secretary Jenner, more or less the same amount of attention?
More, comma, because we're getting after the competitive federal grant funds that are very aligned to what we're trying to do. That was one sentence.
Well, then you just tacked on another.
Oh, I did. Oh, God. Okay.
Commissioner.
more, because I have to pay attention to what's happening and what's changing so rapidly. So yes, a lot more attention.
How many times have you spoken to Education Secretary Linda McMahon since she took office, Secretary Jenner?
Quite a few, and had dinner, and I'd have to think about that.
Sure.
And then the other point person we speak to a lot, and this is a semicolon longer sentence. The other person we speak to a lot is Assistant Secretary Kirsten Basler,
Yeah.
who, yeah, quite often. They've
Who's a
been
former, who's
very,
a former
very
colleague
easy
of
to get a
yours.
hold of with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
I will add the same. Several times I have also had dinner with the secretary. So there have been several touch points where I've been able to share what we would like in Rhode Island.
Secretary, last lightning round question. Secretary McMahon has said that 47 cents on every federal education dollar, every title dollar, and other dollars meant for schools is wasted on administrative cost and doesn't get to schools and students. Is that true or close to true in your state, Secretary Jenner?
In Indiana, it is, we're probably closer to 40 cents.
Got it.
And that's at a state, looking statewide. Every district's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, it's not the case in Rhode Island. Depending on the grant, but it's like 0.8% of those dollars stay with us. But most of it goes to the districts. So that is not correct.
Wow.
Well, I think
Indiana,
real quick, I maybe misunderstood your question. I think what Secretary McMahon has been articulating is that 47 cents on the dollar goes to administration in terms of federal compliance. You have to hire people to get the federal compliance paperwork done. It's not it's just to be clear, that is her point, which is how I responded at we're around 40 cents. If we're talking about how much money goes from the federal government through way to districts, it is closer to what Angélica is, because remember, it's formulaic. So we're all going to be similar there in terms of what flows.
Yeah, but even in that case, we don't spend that kind of money on compliance. That is not what we do here, and we are very intentional about that.
That's interesting. That makes me think there's a story and wondering why the numbers are quite different, and what's happening in Indiana. Maybe my Chalkbeat colleagues can look into this. One more non-lightning round question, then we'll go to audience questions. Last year, the Education Department froze billions in federal education funding, which were eventually released. But they froze the money and caused a lot of concerns. There are some indications that the administration may do so again. OMB has not released money to the Education Department. Are you all concerned that there's going to be a funding freeze again from this administration? We'll start with you, Secretary Jenner.
That was tough last summer when the funding freeze occurred. And I communicated that to the people who I felt like I needed to, very honestly. I didn't publicly blast. I would not do that to either administration, whoever's we just want solutions, but that was tough. But I asked our team specifically that question yesterday, and they did not have concerns at this time. And Angélica might have different thoughts, but that was the briefing I got yesterday. And again, Matt, if there are challenges, we will do everything we can to have the proper communications, the respectful communications, to make sure the right thing is done for Indiana and our students.
Yeah, so I am concerned. When that happened, I picked up the phone and I called OMB myself, and I spoke with the chief of staff. I had a very lengthy conversation, and I think that there is a lack of understanding of the impact of that funding and how that funding is used. And so I had deep concerns, and obviously we were one of the states that sued. And if that happens again, we will be in that lawsuit once again. So I am concerned because of the conversation that I had, and it wasn't the Secretary of Education that I had the conversation with. I want to make that clear. I had it with OMB, and there was this thought that some of this money, was not useful or that they were being used to indoctrinate children. And none of us are doing that. I have to say that what we are doing is really focusing on reading. We're focusing on math. We're focusing on CTE programs, graduation. That's where we're really looking at all of us, I think, across the board. That is the conversation that we're having.
Dr. Jenner.
And real quick, you know what is, I think, dangerous. And again, we try to protect our people from this. I think, Angélica, you probably do too. But the fear mongering and trying to predict the future can be dangerous. We need our teachers, our schools focused on the main thing every single day, and then our jobs are to navigate other stuff that might hit. So again, I am not concerned at all about a freeze coming.
Yeah, and so Katie, I just want to say, I don't think it's fear mongering. It's reality. It happened, right? And I think the teachers, those conversations don't happen with the teachers, but they happen with the superintendents, because we had to start thinking about whether we were going to lay off people at our level, at the district level. I think that's real. And we are planners, and we use our budget to plan ahead. And it really, it was about after school programs. It was about teacher training. So I think that it's more about us having the ability to plan moving forward. We never, the funding might have changed, but we could always depend on that funding. So I'm hopeful that it'll be there, but I can't guarantee that.
Let's get into some audience submitted questions. So you all can continue to submit questions in the Q&A, and you can also look at what has been submitted and upvote the ones you want me to ask. I'm going to start with some of the pre-submitted questions, though, while you all look through the Q&A and upvote the ones you like. So the most common question we got, not surprising to you both, was about special education. And so I'll read a couple of them very briefly. One was simply, how will special education 504 and IEPs be impacted, presumably by the federal government changes? And also, if education authority shifts more to states, how do we ensure students with disabilities still receive equitable services nationwide and specifically in Indiana? I take it our questioner is from your home state, Dr. Jenner, so you can take that first.
Yeah. I mean, this is what's tricky with special education law right now, is it is in law, right? Mm-hmm. Most of it is. So when teachers come to us with great ideas, or even like, hey, we're really struggling with this, it will genuinely take an act of Congress to fix it. I mean, I sure wish that Angélica and I could make a phone call on some of these to clear the barriers. Again, regardless of who's in the White House. But it will take an act of Congress to really adjust some of the special education law ideas that are coming from, or the smart ideas that are coming from the classrooms across the state of Indiana. So yeah, an act of Congress. I wish that it just took a simple phone call. We would have already done it, wouldn't we, Angélica? We recognize, I think, again, regardless of blue state, red state, purple state, special education students matter deeply. We need to make sure we're giving them the best possible services. And the world around us has evolved. Everybody knows that so quickly. And I think it's time that we pull that out and really have some tough conversations and make sure we're doing the best for special education students, as well as students that don't have an IEP or 504. Yeah. Angélica, would love to hear your.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, because I think one of the things that I would like the federal government to focus on is on fully funding special education, right? Kids have diverse needs, and our differently able students need more supports, right? We're including them in the math and the literacy, and how does that work? But I will tell you, as a parent of a child who's autistic, I don't think you want to mess with special ed parents, because, those rights that our kids have been fought for a very long time. And Matt, your question about the federal government and its role now in the states, part of the federal government's job is that, right? And that's why there's so many laws in special education, because they didn't exist before, right? There was I remember, special ed classes in the basement. We have come a long way, and we still have a long way to go, right? And I think that we just have to be very careful. And Katie's right. I don't think that that's something that anyone's going to be able to move overnight. And I think that it is an opportunity for us to collectively fight for more funding and more ways to actually meet the needs of these students.
And
Okay.
just to be clear, it should be to get the best service for all kids. It should be the special ed parents. It should also be our teachers having the conversation about how to best serve a child. And it is a back and forth, very important conversation. The best services we can give to a child occur when it's both. And so the problem that we will face is if we get into an us versus them. No, the focus is on the kid, but we all should be in the room having the conversation about how to best serve. And I appreciated that Angélica said, we have come a long way, but we have a long way to go. And that is where I hear teachers every day and parents, both repeating that same kind of sentiment. And I think we need to have the conversation, even though it may be a tough one.
Okay, we need to do a whole separate event about special education.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to hold you guys to that. I think we could. I think it actually is quite worthwhile. All right, I'm going to read an audience question. Here it goes from Sarah Ryan. Federal funding for public education is a small share of the total pie, but mighty in the sense that these dollars have historically been dedicated to specific vulnerable student populations. What systems or requirements are the panelist states considering should waivers be granted to ensure that the needs of those student groups, low income, multilingual, with disabilities, their needs are being effectively met, especially given that the Office for Civil Rights is very limited in its oversight role now? Commissioner, do you want to start with that one? Or
Sure. We're not applying for waivers in those areas because I am very cautious of that. And our safeguards are in our accountability system, right? So just to give you an idea of our accountability system, you can only be as high, we have a 5-star system, as your lowest star. And when we look at our multilingual learners and we look at our differently able, if you're not doing right by those populations, then you're just...
yeah.
It is a problem. But we also look at the funding. There's funding that's dedicated. And historically, those of us that have worked in special ed and as a parent, the dollars matter, right? Because it is really important because it just gets put into this bucket that makes me very nervous. I don't know what the safeguards are going to be in Indiana. I'm sure that Katie's very thoughtful about that. But we fought too long to get here.
Yeah, I'm really glad that person asked that question. It's an important one, and I think is one that can be surrounded with a lot of myth and a good old political swirl. The way we wrote our waiver is the formulas will continue, and then that money will go to a local school. So if you have a student who qualifies in multiple lines, the money can work together to make sure the child reads. We're hoping to get some of the bureaucracy and paperwork out of the way so we can focus on the single child. We will, as I've committed over and over publicly, we will be actively collecting data and understanding our return on investment because all of our students matter. They absolutely do. But I'm a believer. If we're gonna, if we cannot keep doing the same old thing and expect different results. That is unacceptable. So we will gladly do the best we can and serve all of our kids. But again, more coming soon, Matt. But the formulaic money, the formulaic money will go to that local student based on that student population or that local school based.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. I know, Matt, you don't understand. So how is that different? Because right now you can do that. Like we expect our schools, when they get these dollars, if you have a child that is a differently able student who is either low performing, who is a multilingual learner, they can braid those dollars now. Like how is that different?
Yeah, I think the key that you just said is braid the dollars. I mean, when I was in Southern Indiana as assistant superintendent, my responsibility was all the federal grants. And tons of time spent in like, how do you get all the dollars to adjust, and a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here and multiple different applications. And so, Angélica, we're trying to get some of the bureaucracy and compliance out of the way. So, less of all the maze, the puzzle work that some of our districts are doing now. I can remember we wanted a reading instructional coach, and we had to do like 10,000 from here, 6,000 from here, right? It's, how can we make this easier so that the focus and the time can be spent on kids? And again, we'll keep you posted. If our system is perfect right now, we'll let you know, but I don't think it is. So we're going to give it a shot to make it.
Okay, another pre-submitted question. Is the president's goal truly to return decision-making back to the states? If so, why is he threatening to withhold government funding to schools that don't follow certain rules regarding transgender students? What is the actual outline for government returning control to the states because random agendas arise in the government attempts to take control back? Do either of you have a reaction to that question/sentiment?
I think that's a good.
I absolutely believe the president wants to return education to the states. Absolutely. Whomever asked the question, I appreciate the question. It probably is a little bit of a different answer in Indiana than it is Rhode
But
Island. I know that surprises no one.
would you feel that education was being returned to the states if you were in a blue state, Dr. Jenner?
Absolutely. Because think about it. We already have the standards, the curriculum, the assessment. What we really need is to break through some of the challenges with some of the funding to really focus reading and the main thing. So again, I'm not in a blue state.
Okay, let's get to someone who is. Let's get to
I don't
Commissioner.
know. And
Do you feel returned?
Well, I started off by saying it is already here. Like that's a talking point, right? Like we already have that. What is being withheld from us is funding if beliefs don't match or ideology don't match. And that I think is problematic, right? I spoke earlier about funding that we had for reading. And because there was an organization that was helping us with that had the word equity in it, our reading money was taken away. So I think it's a complicated response. One, we already have the power or the responsibility, but what we are being pushed by the dollars is to conform to one person or another person's belief. And we don't try to do that here.
I'm going to ask two last questions because we're out of time, and you guys can choose whether to try to respond to one or both. They're both kind of meaty questions. So one is, what is an example of a smart idea for special education that you aren't allowed to do because of the law? Question two, I'm going to throw in on a different topic. How are you thinking about the new educational school choice tax credits that the federal government has recently enacted? You can take one or both in our last minutes. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I think we have about 90 seconds. So I'll go fast, Angélica, to give you the last word. I'll hit on the new education school tax credit. We are very excited about that in Indiana. Newsflash, it can go to all school types. So we have traditional public school leaders, charter leaders, non-pub, they're all thinking through how might we best leverage these dollars to serve students. I also recognize and understand Indiana is a school choice state where parents decide where their students go. The number one choice that parents make goes traditional public to traditional public, but they still have that choice. But we are excited about what could be and getting, again, more money for our students. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity. Love seeing you, Angélica. Thank you.
I'll start off by saying that if anyone's going to figure it out, it's going to be Katie. So I have full confidence in her and what she's doing. But a couple of things. One thing in special ed, I think that really using a little more flexibility in high school. I think is really important, and it's something that we're really looking at here in Rhode Island. I'm lucky enough to have an autistic son that is experiencing this, that we're seeing how he grows academically when we have some of those flexibilities. So so there's an opportunity here. The second one is I think that there's a lot of confusion with the tax credit. So my legislature last night voted taking away the power from the governor to actually enact it, which I think is a missed opportunity. I think that there isn't enough information. What I was hearing last night were people saying, well, it's taking money away from the public school. No, it's not. So this is not money that we would have. This is money that instead of going to the federal government could come to our state. You could have approved vendors that can work after school, that can, there's many different ways. I think that people don't really understand it and they're seeing it as a threat. But, it's not a lot of money. But if we use that money for people that are providing special ed supports, this could be a good thing. So I'm with Katie on that. I think that there needs to be a little more explanation, a little more understanding, and really understanding the different uses for it. So I think I look forward to that opportunity.
I want to thank our panelists for their time. This was a great conversation, Commissioner Infante-Green and Secretary Jenner. I really enjoyed it. Thank you again to our sponsor, the Indiana State Teachers Association. And most of all, thanks to you all for tuning in, being here, for their engagement and questions. You can continue to follow our coverage at chalkbeat.org. When you leave the webinar, a survey about the event will pop up. Please do take a minute to read us and give us your feedback. We read it and learn from it all. Thanks again and have a good rest of your day. Bye now.